Hey, what's up everyone? It's Emily and welcome back to my channel. I have got my spooky sweater on and it's time for us to talk about some more spooky books for spooky season. Even though Halloween and spooky season as a whole is like my favorite time of year, I am still fairly new to the horror genre, like the true horror. For me, more books that I read this time of year are like cozy books or spooky books, but not necessarily true like things that keep me up at night, I guess. But I do have a couple recommendations that I really loved that I just really felt compelled to share with everyone. So I'm going to rec you some spooky books if you're looking for a last minute read to pick up for Halloween. We're gonna go from least terrifying to me to most terrifying. I know that horror is really subjective to the person. I will try and give you a good understanding of each of these books, but I'm gonna try and keep it spoiler free as much as I can. Obviously, everyone's gonna find their own things spooky or scary, so just read this at your own discretion and check your triggers and all that good stuff. The first book I'm gonna recommend is called Rules for Vanishing, and I read this book when I was working at a bookstore actually, and I was excited for it because it is Blair Witch Trial-esque. Sorry, I have no idea what's going on with my lighting today, so we're just gonna say it adds to the essence of the spookiness. So it's a found footage story. It's actually the first found footage story I ever read, but it's very different than House of Leaves. And House of Leaves I'm not putting on this list because I feel like it's its own monster of a thing. These are just gonna be like traditional books. This is a found footage book, very much in the style of the Blair Witch Project, where everything in the book is either like audio recordings or descriptions of what's happening in a video or text messages between these different teenagers. And the premise of it is that once a year, this path in the woods appears, and the main character's name is Sarah, and her sister Becca went missing in the woods a year ago, and on like the anniversary of her disappearance, they decide to find this trail in the woods, and they enter this different dimension. What I liked about this one is that it's a ghost story, and it's very spooky, kind of a la Stranger Things, less monstery though, just more ghosty, but it's not gory. So if you're not into like people getting maimed and stuff like that, it's definitely good for someone who wants a little bit of that ghost spookiness of the season without delving too far down the rabbit hole of horrorness. And the idea that it's all found footage made the pacing really unique and the story very interesting, and it really kept you guessing like what was going on because we don't have a narrator to like tell us the thoughts of everyone. It's just you're kind of on the outside watching everything and things are just being described to you. Like you're not in the story, you're in the story, but you're not in the characters in the story. You're just seeing it all from the outside, which is really cool. Number 2 on my list is going to be Night Shift by Stephen King. This is going to be the only Stephen King on this list. This is a book of his short stories. Some of them are kind of spooky and scary, some of them really aren't. They're just more kind of weird with horror elements in them, which I thought was a really interesting mix and something that would be good for people who want things that have a little bit more creepy horror vibes to them, and then things that maybe are just more weird and kooky. And I also like that it's short stories because a lot of Stephen King stuff is really long and can be really dense. But this could be a really good introduction to a lot of his work because it's short, you can skip stories that you're not really vibing with, and you can read this book while not committing to one of his like 1,000-page monsters. Plus, some of these stories actually are references to some of his other books or take place in the other stories that he's written, which is really cool if you decide to delve more into his work. If you've read a lot of his stuff already and you haven't read this one, you'll probably get some references to like Salem's Lot, or if you're looking at reading more of his stuff, these will be references into later books that you read, which might be really cool if you're into like the Easter eggs and the Stephen King universe. Overall, not too scary, but I would say this one probably has a few more like grosser things in it that some people will probably find pretty horrific, maybe. Number 3 is Bird Box, and this is a psychological thriller / horror book. I've talked about this one a few times before, but I'm going to talk about it again. What I love about this one is that it is so short. You could definitely read it in a day if you're looking for a quick thriller. And one of the other things I really like about it is that it's a survival horror. It's not just helpless people being helpless, being chased by some murderer or something like that. Like these are people who are just straight up trying to survive in a horrible world. And those are some of my favorite horror stories or psychological thriller concepts. And I know that there are a lot of them like that, but some don't do it very well. And I think this one does it pretty well. I also think if you have seen the movie, it's still worth reading the book because the ending is slightly different. And I would say it's a little bit more gruesome. And I don't know, I would definitely I would definitely still give it a read. The concept of this one is that it takes place 5 years after these monsters have shown up, and if you look at the monster, that you are compelled to commit suicide, which is really triggering to some people, so definitely watch out for that. And 5 years after these monsters have shown up, Mallory and her 2 children, who are both 4 years old, have to make a 20-mile trek down a river blindfolded, because if you look at the monster, you're compelled to unalive yourself. If you don't look at them, you're good. They don't really tell you whether or not they can actually touch you or something like that, or if it's just the scariness of that it's around you and you cannot see them. So Mallory and these 2 4-year-olds have to make this trek down the river blindfolded to safety, or what they hope is safety. It interweaves the past with the present of her on the river journey to this place, and also how they got to this point. Because at the beginning of the story, Mallory is just pregnant, so we kind of have all of these years leading up to it. I really love the stakes in this book. It's super thrilling. It's all in your head, psychological, right? We never get a description of what the monsters look like. And I really love that it's about survival more than anything. And I thought this one was really good. But it's number 3 because I would say it has a bit more gruesome elements to it, and it's definitely scarier than the other books that I've mentioned so far. I think this one definitely stuck with me a bit longer. Number 4 is White Smoke, which is a new book that I read recently, and this one is also kind of a psychological horror deal. They describe it as The Haunting of Hill House meets Get Out, which I would say is probably a pretty accurate way to describe this book. What I love about this one is the paranormal elements to it, and the overall creepiness of everything going on. And also I really loved the dynamic of a lot of the characters and the family especially. Also creepy children. If you are afraid of creepy children, this one will creep you out definitely, I think. So the concept of this one is Marigold is our main character, and she and her newly blended family are moving from California to the Midwest into this big giant old mansion, that house basically, that's just been refurbished because her mom won a prize where they get this house for free if they live in the town and produce some sort of work for the town. So her mom is going to write a book, and then they get to live in this house for free, and they really need to, because they're going through some financial hardships because of Marigold's past, which she is also running away from. But soon they realize that the town is a little weird. There's some weird stuff happening in the town that aren't adding up, as well as they think that their house is haunted because things are disappearing, doors are slamming, voices are being heard, and there's a stench coming from somewhere in the house. This book was so creepy. I listened to this on an audiobook, and I was sitting in the living room, and I was like, there better not be anything in this house right now, because it was creepy, it was scary. I definitely think it's worth a read. And this one is number 4 for me because I would say it was definitely one of the more spine-tingling books I've ever read, where it felt like there was someone breathing down my back, as well as the real world horrors to it. It was just scary because it felt real, I suppose, is the best way to put it. It's a great book. Please pick it up. Okay, and this last book, number 5, is The Troop by Nick Cutter, which I read this year, and it was the first horror book I read this year. I read it on audiobook, and it gets shivers thinking about this book. It is so yucky. It is yucky. So if you are not someone who likes yucky horror, this one will not be for you. I didn't know what to expect reading this book. I went into it blind, but I did that on purpose because I really wanted to have the full experience. But it's yucky, and there's animal cruelty, there's dismembering, there's lots of very descriptive gore happening, and bodily harm amongst other things. So this is definitely one. I feel like it's weird that I liked this book, but what I liked about it is he did such a great job creating the suspense and the absolute disgustingness of this world, and it was horrific. And I mean, that's what it's supposed to be. I think that's what makes a good horror, and I think that's why I liked this one so much. Definitely not a genre that I find myself going back to over and over again, but it's definitely one that has stuck with me. I still think about this book almost every single day. So basically, the premise of it is that this scoutmaster and his troop of Boy Scouts are going to a small island for 3 days to do a wilderness camping thing. And on the first night that they're there, a man rows to the island on a boat, and he is skin and bones. He hasn't eaten in weeks, and he is starving. And what this man brings is something more horrific than ghosts. This is another one about survival, which I think is the other reason why I really liked it. It's about people really persevering in like the worst of situations and taking people's psyche and really just like laying it all out there, like what people will do and become to survive. It kind of reminds me of the Lord of the Flies in that aspect, in the terms of like, it's a group of boys in the wilderness trying to figure shit out and solve the problems that they are facing. So if you like that kind of analyses, I suppose like this could be a really good one for you. This isn't something that like terrified me like in the dark, right? Like it's not something that I can't walk around my kitchen anymore at night because the lights are off or something like that. It's just, it was a little gross. It was gross. So that's what I'm gonna say about that. But if you like those kinds of books, this is gonna be so great for you. Like Nick Cutter's descriptions and his use of like adjectives and like the senses, like I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it. Just the way that he describes things with all 5 senses really, really, really brings you into every moment. And the way that he describes things are so visceral. I could feel it. I could feel everything that he was saying. It was crazy. I've never had a book do that to me before, to that extent. So yeah, that one definitely is my number 1 in terms of like amount of like reaction from me from a book. So those are my 5 spookiest reads for you to read this October. If you are looking for something for the end of October, I would love to hear if you read any of these books. Let me know any thoughts that you have down in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you all. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give me a like and subscribe to my channel. It really helps me out so much. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I cannot wait to see you in the next one.